Welcome to the Universal Dancer podcast with your host Leslie Zehr, author of The Alchemy of Dance and the Alchemia Remedies. Coming to you live from Cairo, Egypt, the ancient land of Kem. Journey with us to explore sacred dance, the sacred arts, the mystical and the magical. Join a community of like-minded souls seeking to understand the cosmic dance of co-creation through the sacred arts. Come along and expand your mind, ignite your creativity, and explore something new and something old.
Welcome to the podcast. I'm happy you could join us. Please let us know where you're joining from. And my guest tonight is Dunya McPherson. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her in just a minute. But before that, I want to thank you all for being here, and thank you to those who were on the live stream last time. Thank you for your comments and your questions. And we'll be doing the same thing tonight. So if you have any questions, just put the hashtag ask so that I can find them, because I can't always find them in the comments. So if you have something that you want to ask, be sure to put that hashtag. Okay, so we have some people joining us. Welcome. And I'm going to introduce you to my guest for this evening. My guest in this episode is Dunya McPherson. Dunya is a writer, author, choreographer, dancer, Shatari Sufi adept, and founder of Dancemeditation, specializing in techniques that open the wonderment of deep, subtle, peaceful self-perception. She holds a BFA in dance from the Julliard School, an MA in writing from Lesley University, was an artist scholar at Columbia University, and trained extensively in yoga with Shri Dharma Mitra. Significant study with master dance teachers whose work has influenced hers includes Elena Lentini, Anahad Sofian, Janet Panetta, and Alfredo Corvino. After 1,001 days of training in Sufism with Sufi master Adnan Sarhan, Dunya received teaching permission. Her memoir, Skin of Glass, Finding Spirit in the Flesh, chronicles her journey of dance and mysticism. She has performed widely as both a concert dancer and as a Middle Eastern dancer. Her whirling veil dance is featured in the film Dances of Ecstasy. She directed and choreographed the film Shafi for NOLA's 2007 Dramarama Festival. She is critically acclaimed as both a dancer and choreographer, and recipient of numerous choreographic grants, including the prestigious National Endowment for the Arts Choreography Fellowship. Dunya and her dance meditation work are widely referenced and profiled in books and journalism, including Your Body Mandala, Midnight at the Crossroads, Has Belly Dance Lost Its Soul, and Reckoning with Spirit in the Paradigm of Performance. Elizabeth Zimmer of Dance Magazine said of Dunya, she evoked something essentially female, essentially powerful. And Jennifer Dunning of the New York Times wrote, a modern-day Isadora Duncan approached Ruth St. Denis as she slithered through an impudently sensuous belly dance, a vibrant performer and an unusual and talented choreographer. Welcome, Dunya.
Hi, Leslie. So nice to be here with you.
It's nice to have you here. I'm excited. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
So let's jump right in. So I think before we go forward, I'd like to go back, and maybe you can just tell us, I know that you studied at Julliard, but what happened before that? How did you get involved in dance? Where did that all begin for you?
Yeah, so for me, I would call it my original language. You know, I was one of those, I imagine many children this is true for, but certainly for me, I was dancing around in my parents' living room, my living room as a little girl, as a child, just dancing on the rug, on the reds and the blues of the pattern of the carpet. And my father had a record playing of Brahms or something, and I was dancing. You know, it was just always dancing from the beginning. And then, of course, when you have a child that likes to do something and you want to support that, and you have the money too, I guess. But, you know, I had a wonderful teacher as a child who was Hungarian Jewish woman, Clara Koenig, her name. And she taught me ballet and modern dance and was very supportive of my creativity. And that lasted quite a bit, all the way through, you know, a period of high school. I went to a performing arts high school when I was a sophomore in high school, and I spent only 1 year there, but it was professional training. And then eventually I ended up going to Julliard later. So I had started out just loving it. And quite honestly, I loved a lot of things in the arts. I loved painting. I loved music. I liked to write. I was one of those people that could just meander through different arts. But dancing was the easiest for me. For some reason, I understood it from the get-go. And it was just, as I said, it was really my most native language. So I never even thought for a second to leave it or to not do it. Yeah.
What kind of dance were you doing? All kinds, or?
Actually, not all kinds. I was doing, with this teacher, ballet and modern. And, you know, in that era, which was the 60s, modern dance wasn't, you know, I was in a little town in Massachusetts, you know, on Cape Cod by the ocean. So I wasn't in a big city where you have many options. But this teacher had studied in Hungary before she had to leave from the war. You know, I had studied with Rudolf Laban, who is one of the originators of modern dance, and Hanya Holm, and people that I came to know later, their work and actually as people, when I was at Julliard. So I was exposed early on to this idea of creating dances, of working with shapes and energy, not just steps. So much more conceptual things, but conceptual things in movement. And then there was also ballet with, you know, all of its formality and steps and vocabulary that we all are very familiar with. So I don't know, it was quite unusual, I suppose, for a kid to have that exposure from not being in a big city. But the town I was in was a major science center. And so it had a lot of cultural activities for the kids, as well as obviously for the adults that liked, you know, scientists also liked art. At that time, science and art were pretty connected and supported, and becoming more and more supported, I would say, by the U.S. government, in part because, let me just throw this in, because of the Cold War. So we wanted to excel as a country in these things. And that's why there was so much of that in my youth. So it was a very special time to be growing up. I feel that, happy about that. So.
I agree. It's a very different, things have changed a lot, and maybe they're for the better, but yes, it definitely changed the dynamic of things. And then you were accepted to Julliard and you went to the big city to study. And again, what were you studying there? I mean, different types of dance, or still ballet and modern?
My teacher in high school, she had taken me occasionally to the city. You know, everybody who is from New York or lives in New York for a long time calls it the city. There is no other city. So she had taken me down to the city, and I had taken some classes at at Joffrey School and New Dance Group Studio. I was very, very, very inspired by that. And my mother was like, no. So she made me, you know, apply to college. I went to Bennington College for a year because it had been where Martha Graham, by way of Martha Hill, I'm saying these names for people who might know them, but Martha Graham, everybody knows, had started a dance department way back when. So it was one of the very few academic schools in the country where there was dance. So that was my little thing of like, I'll do what my mom says and I'll do what I want. But then after the first freshman year, it was so clear to me I was really needed to go and to the city. So I actually auditioned quite late in September, right before the semester began at Julliard, and got in and transferred and was in hog heaven for the rest of my, bachelor's degree time, dancing 8 to 10 hours a day. So the curriculum there was, you took a ballet class, and you took a modern class just as your basic technical things every day. Then you also studied choreography, so you go to composition class. Then you were in different people's dances and you're creating your own dances, so you're rehearsing. And then there were some other, some academic courses that we took that were all sort of arts based, like history of art, history of dance, history of music, those things. And then, there was also what they call character class, a little smattering of jazz, so there was this sort of attempt at a well-rounded dancer, but primarily it was modern dance and ballet. Ballet was sort of the technical underbelly of the training, that got you up on your leg and pulled up and your feet pointed. And then modern dance was this exposure to and mastery. Actually, by the time you get to Julliard, you're working on this idea of mastery of different dynamics of, for Graham, it would be contraction and release. That was sort of her fundamental dynamic idea. For Jose Limon technique, which was this fall and rebound. So there were, these classes were based around these almost philosophical movement concepts. And we learned those techniques. And then, of course, there was a period of time when we did what they call repertory, which is you're rehearsing for a major department performance that happens, spring concert, something like that. And so you would be in some well-known or very high-level choreographer's piece, which you auditioned for, and then you'd be rehearsing that up until the time of the performance. So it was sort of a yearly, show. And that was fantastic because there were some amazing choreographers, and you're watching their process, and some of them were brutal, and some of them were fantastically inspiring, and so it was a study in choreography and also being in pieces of choreography. It was all very Western classical work. I didn't know anything about other cultural forms. They were not concerned with that. This department was solely about Western ideas. And I just learned this recently, is that the time, I went to Julliard when it had just moved into Lincoln Center. It had been uptown, all of Julliard had been uptown, but then Lincoln Center was built, and this, was this fabulous jewel of the arts with, Metropolitan Opera House and State Theater and Philharmonic Hall, and then Julliard right there. And when that move took place, which was maybe 3 years before I was attending the school, there was a huge argument about dumping the dance department, because dance is, the thing that nobody really thinks is a real art form. That's pretty much what happens to dance. So, and there was a tremendous struggle by Martha Hill, who I mentioned before, who was this champion and a fighter, and she got in there and said, no, you have to move modern dance. Modern dance is one of the original American art forms. There's jazz and there's modern dance. So, she fought and fought and fought, and she was up against, for a little piece of political history here, New York City Ballet, which was George Balanchine, which was a big organization, powerful, backed by the Ford Foundation, that wanted to take over all these new studios that had been originally designed for Julliard dance. But now, Ford Foundation and Balanchine came in and they were going to take them all. So anyway, there was a struggle to keep modern dance and at Julliard. So I think that there was a lot of this feeling of like, yes, we could do everything, but we're here to do this thing, this one thing, which is to take this form that emerged in America, Western art form, and, make it appear in the pantheon, which up until that time, as and everybody who does dance knows, that dance has always been at the bottom of the rung for the arts, because I think, I don't know, it's arguable, I suppose, but that it uses the body. And there was always this confusion between the body and prostitution and showing your body and women and, you know, all of this feminist history problem, you know, in the patriarchy. So dance struggled and struggled. In this time period, moving modern dance into Julliard, it actually got its toes up, and it wasn't the only thing that happened for this event to occur. Dance made its way up into a significant art form, and not just as ballet, you know, but as a form that had the word dance on it that could include many things. And from that, you know, has been a huge evolution of what is considered legitimate dance, you know, starting by academia recognizing Middle Eastern dance or dance from other cultures or African dance, or, you know, these things were part of all of this period of time where dance suddenly became a legitimate art form. So I didn't, unbeknownst to me as a young thing, you know, 19 or something, applying to Julliard and getting in and stepping in and walking into this like fabulous building with the most perfect studios and amazing theater, I didn't really realize that I was also stepping into a place that was such a historical moment, you know. There's quite a long answer for you.
Yeah, but that's really interesting for me, because you clarified a lot, because I was in the US probably during that period of time. I remember going to Lincoln Center often. And when I took dance, we had ballet and we had jazz. And so then somehow modern came in, and I didn't know where that came from. You know, I wasn't like, I recognized that sort of after I left the US more than when I was there. So this makes a lot of sense that that's how the whole thing evolved. So when did you get into Middle Eastern dance?
So in 1980, but let me just go back for a minute, which is, you know, modern dance actually, they always consider the mother of modern dances is Isadora Duncan, followed very closely by Ruth St. Denis. And Ruth St. Denis, out of which came Martha Graham, did these dances that were inspired by Indian dance, by yoga, by Middle Eastern dance. They were sort of like, you know, you'll be in the drawing room seeing a dancer in a fabulous costume. This is, you know, back in the 30s, 20s, something like this. So, and out of that came Martha Graham and Doris Humphrey and sort of, and many, many innovators actually that were bringing in influences. So the original influences of modern dance actually were, you know, were quite varied, and they came from a lot of different dance cultures. And then they kind of got shaken down into this, you know, more so-called purified modern dance forms and influences that was maybe more cerebral, maybe more philosophical, but the roots are there. So by the time I got into Middle Eastern dance, I had been dancing a long time professionally in New York. I had a career, as you mentioned, you know, in your introduction. Thank you for reading all of that. You know, was really working toward becoming, as much as I could possibly be, you know, a choreographer of significance in New York, and it was going pretty well. And then I got terribly injured when I was 28 and had been therefore dancing professionally in the city for, you know, almost a decade. And then began the search, as is often, it's true for many people. The search usually begins when things fall apart. So I kept doing as much as I could do. I couldn't perform very well. I could teach. I had university teaching positions, and I kept doing that. But in my search for what could I do, somebody took me to a class by one of Adnan Sarhan's students, and I fell in love with it. And then I went. Then Adnan came through New York at Christmas that year, and I went to one of his workshops. And then one of the first things we did was a Sufi whirling, but we also did all these other movement things and exercises that were sort of, you know, just exercises really. And it was a huge group, like 200 people in this room, and music was Persian and Arabic. And I recognized the nature of a learning environment, teacher, students, but in every other way, it was so different. You close your eyes when the music was playing and you were moving. You know, he'd lead for a little while, so there was no like do this, do this combination, and then you do it, repeat it back. No, he would sort of sit and lead and do these slow, beautiful movements, and then he'd say, "Close your eyes," and I'd sink into this very deep inner state, and I'd be in another world. And the music was often Persian or Arabic. So that was how I came into movement and Middle Eastern music. And of course, he's a Sufi master. So my initial connection to this entire culture was through Sufi. It was only after studying with him for a few years that I got the notion that, I could perform this in nightclubs. And then I went and took classes and learned, the things you need to know to be a performer. Obviously, I was already a very adept dancer. So it didn't take me very long to understand how to put a show together. And, I could look a little bit like a belly dancer pretty quickly. And luckily for me, I danced in Anahit's company for a while. So I was dancing in more formal, structure in a theater and choreographies. So that kind of helped take off some of my rough edges. But, I really looked like a modern dancer trying to do a form. And it took years and years and years, really, for me to let go and to have the dance come from where it comes from. If you were maybe born in Egypt or you were born in, a country where it's native to you, that music and movement. But it was okay. I was always very competent as a dancer, so I could, as I said, look pretty close to it. But the main thing for me was I was all this time working with Adnan, and I was working with him a lot. So even though I was still teaching at universities during the year, I would spend my summers at this camp in New Mexico up in the mountains, and all day long we were doing Sufi work, which did not mean praying and thinking about things. It really was exclusively moving and breathing and maybe some chanting and dancing. And he was an amazing drummer in this sort of deep kind of way. It wasn't like club drumming. It was, he'd play it in Iraqi style, or like the Marsh Arabs, really. And it was all about letting go of the top layer of the self and moving into an interiority. So for me, that's how I was doing Middle Eastern dance. I was doing it as a meditation, as a communion, really, and as a way of letting go of my constructed self, whatever I had constructed as a personality, as a dancer. And so then during the year, I would go back and teach, and then I would perform in nightclubs and this and that. But the underbelly of it, the primary driving force, was this mystical connection. I think that probably helped me just in terms of acceptance by the owners and the customers of the nightclubs and the musicians even. It helped me be accepted by them, because in a way I was in some different place with the dance. Maybe I wasn't understanding, exactly where to, do the little developments in the drum solo or something, but I was in the spirit of something that was, perceptible. I don't know, really. I'm just speculating what they really thought. And anyway, I had a wonderful time, and people were very kind, and I had just a terrific performing period of doing Middle Eastern dance. And there were a lot of nightclubs in New York at that time, a lot of Turkish clubs, which I gravitated towards. I was doing more Turkish style dance than Arabic. And I was taken under the wing of a great Romani clarinet player who was celebrated, and when he came to town from Istanbul, and he liked me, and so every time he played a wedding or a party, he'd take me as the dancer. So I really had that wonderful feeling, and I'm sure many people understand this, of being a guest in the most wonderful way drawn into an intimate environment, there in the music and the dance. So it was a wonderful time for me. I really loved it. I love the memory of it tremendously. Yeah.
But that's, I think, one of the points is that any kind of, let's call it folkloric, just because folk meaning from the people, I think it does. That's Middle Eastern are very welcoming people. So that's just part of the culture, I think. But, and it's hard. I think it's hard to go from structured dance, if that's how you've been taught, to something that is more improvisational. But probably having that underlayer of the spiritual aspect, doing that at the same time, probably created some kind of a bridge between the two, in that one is very feeling. I think the spiritual one is very feeling. They're both embodied, but very feeling, and maybe gets you to that place of surrender or letting go in order to really step into the freer aspects of these Middle Eastern dances. That's quite a journey. Yeah,
it's a good description of what you're saying. I think for me, I was an adept improvisational artist in Western dance. I mean, I should just say I had no problem with the fact that it was improvisational. I think I just looked very sort of held instead of, I didn't let go into gravity. It took a long time because, when you pulled up that long to be above the ground, it takes a while to let gravity take you. But also there was something about the music that, in Western art, it's very controlled what you're doing. It's very, you're producing this thing for an audience in the dark over there that is, you are controlling what they're going to see. It's very controlled, and you refine every moment to the end. Right? I mean, that was my experience of it, and I didn't feel this when I was doing belly dancing in nightclubs or belly dancing at all, whether it was in these long, beautiful workshop experiences with Adnan. I felt that was like this little territory way down, and I was in this major cloud of intuitive space that was moving me. And yes, it could be the music, maybe. I mean, it was the music, of course, but it wasn't like I was hearing the surface of the music. I was hearing some underlying dynamic, this flow that I don't think I had ever been able to hear. Let's put it this way, it had been sort of trained out of me in many ways. And I don't think there's really the same level of opportunity for that in Western. I think that there is a very different orientation between Western art and Eastern art. And, I always come to these details, like Middle Eastern music and dance, in my experience, has been, it's evolutionary. Like it starts in one place and it develops a lot, and then it moves to the next section. And, 20 minutes later, you don't have to remember what happened in the beginning. You don't have to hold this in your head. You have gone on this long evolutionary journey with the music and the dance. Whereas in Western music, it's very much, we're going to state this material right now, and then we're going to do a little counter theme, and then we're coming back with variation. And for the piece to have meaning, you have to remember how it was originally stated to you, because it's how you keep returning to that original material that gives meaning to the piece. It's quite a cerebral environment, So this idea of, not having to worry, not having to worry in my head that way, but to stay in the immediate moment of the flow that was happening in the music and the dance. This is just a completely different orientation. And it profoundly changed my life, of course, because it meant that I could attempt to live my life more that way. It actually started to change me. And
well, I think this type of
live my life that way.
This type of dance, though, I think is about surrender. Like it is about that analogy of co-creation. So, but it says a lot about you that you were able to do this, because I think that a lot of people are not able to do this. A lot of people are not able to really surrender to the music, especially if you have been, if you've been taught, if it is very left brain in that, there's mastery. You're supposed to do it until you get better and better at it. And there's, as you said, a structure to it. So I think to be able to break out of that after that much training really says a lot about you, because it's not easy. Once you're programmed into something, it's not easy to just let it go. So clearly there was something in you that already had that vision, whether you knew it or not. And you just found the person that was going to take you there.
Oh, I definitely knew what I was trying to do. I didn't know how to do it. So, and you say really so many important things. There's this thing of surrendering to things. Well, there's a good reason people don't surrender. People are afraid, and because of pain, or trauma or different things, to let go, to say, that the form is something that's created there as almost as a safety. It's like training wheels. Mm-hmm. And to let that go is a huge jump. Sometimes you do feel like you're just jumping off a cliff, and you can take that metaphor to the depth that you want to take it to. For me, I really was a seeker from the beginning. I had tasted these feelings of being in the moment as a little child, and I knew that was it. I knew that was it. And I was, looking for it through different arts and creativity. And, the thing that was so difficult actually for me in being a professional dancer in New York City, modern dancer, was the higher I got in my career and in my artistic ability and what I was actually producing as an artist, the more disappointed I was, because it wasn't it. I wasn't going into that moment. I was not having that experience of the transcendent timelessness. It seemed that I would get so close and it wouldn't happen. And then pretty much from the second I walked in and started working with Adnan, it happened, and it continually happened. Now, I don't know if that mystical communion happens for people who study Middle Eastern dance as a form. And I mean, a billion things happen to all of us when we study something. We are drawn to something and we study it, So I don't know, I guess what I'm saying here is I don't know if you went to study Middle Eastern dance as a form and you were afraid to let go into the moment, if the form itself would push you into the moment. I don't think it would. I think you have to want it. There's part of you that has to want it more than you're afraid of whatever it is that's holding you back. And, we struggle with this equation. And, for me, as I said, that thing of being injured and, was desperately fearful. I was a terrible injury, actually. And I came up against myself, I said, well, this is not the way. This is, whatever it is, as great as it is not the way. And I don't know what the way is. And then I went into the moment when I was first working with Adnan, and it just kept happening over and over. And I went, well, this is where I'm going. I don't understand it, but I'm going here. And I should say, because we're talking about Middle Eastern dance, is that I do love it, and I became very good at it, and I deeply, deeply respect it. And I am also don't care that it's Middle Eastern. What I cared about was the mystical in the momentness. And if I had met a tap dance teacher and that's what happened, then I'd be doing tap dance. If I'd met a flower arranging teacher and that's what happened, But no, I was looking for that mystical connection, that in the momentness. But because I'm a dancer, I am so grateful that I found a teacher who did the transmission and led me into the moment through movement. Yeah, because that really made it much easier for me. As I said, from the beginning, movement was the easiest way to go. Yeah. Well, some people do it through music, some through poetry, through just sitting and being. So,
well, in the end, it's creativity. But unfortunately, I think in our Western minds or left brains or whatever, we have also been taught that we need to master it, so we need to teach it, or we need to learn it from a teacher, and rather than sort of just doing it. And I think that that's unfortunate, because creativity should be something, again, as a child, we often have the experience of just doing it because maybe we were too young to go to a teacher. But as we get older, then we're taken to drawing classes or dance classes or music classes, and we forget how to be spontaneous and allow that creativity to come out. And I think it's often that this sort of judgment that we think we're not going to do it well enough. I've had a lot of women in my classes that they want the choreography because they don't want a free dance, because they don't want to do it wrong. And that's really sad. I mean, children don't have that. They just want to move around or draw draw with a crayon, just lines or anything, because it's about doing it. So I think it's difficult, especially if you're brought up that way, that you need to master something. It's difficult to let go. And it is a spiritual thing. I think that creativity is something that comes from so deep inside of us that we have to let it out, but don't necessarily know how to do that in the way that we've been programmed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
So,
you hit it on the head when you said, a person doesn't want to do it wrong. I think this is the tremendous issue with creating one's persona and one's, constructed self. I like that term for it. In the world, is that we want to create this personality and this look. Dancer is one thing over here, but in general, just say, we want to make this creature that is not vulnerable to criticism, is not going to be abused or, dismissed or disrespected or in danger. That's a lot of what this construction is about. It's to keep us safe. And I think that's to be respected tremendously, but it comes at a huge cost. And when I'll return to dancing for a minute, well, one of the biggest issues for me and the biggest struggle, it was this tremendous hatred of my body, even when my body was quite beautiful. There was a period of time when it was very, it just had the basics of, the right color, the right size, the right, look and everything culturally for a while. As a woman, that's a pretty tight little thing in there. We all know that. And then it started to change, where I was less the right color, right age, right size, right things, and then there would be this huge, like my fault that I wasn't those things. Instead of saying those things are screwed up, those things are not, those things are there to imprison us. Let's just say women, to imprison women, to make women unable to breathe. This is another form of foot binding or corseting. And these things get internalized, and we spend an awful lot of time, struggling to feel okay about our body, let's just say, because we're talking about dance here. So, then you kind of, go into a dance class and you think, I want my body to look right in the mirror. I want to feel okay about it. I want to dress it a certain way. I want to, have this look. But the real struggle is that you just don't want to be criticized. You just don't want to be disrespected. You just don't want to be put down or denied or abused in some way. So that's what all that's about, this thing of being right and not being wrong. And it's quite real. It's quite real. So the thing that was interesting for me has how many years that's taken me to work on this, to come up to consciousness that was really at the root of my pain. And I was here in this Sufi reality of I close my eyes, there's no mirrors, I'm not looking at myself, I'm not judging myself, this sort of psychological piece. And I thought, well, now I feel the movement and I feel who I am, and it's all okay, and I'm safe, and this is incredible, and I'm dancing freely in the music. I'm done. I'm good. But no, I can't keep coming through this and wearing through this false self that I had built. Or it wasn't false in the sense of bad. It wasn't really me. It was the armor, the look I had to put on to get by, and in the culture. And now I feel that, dance meditation, which is what I call the work that I teach, which is, of course, comes tremendously from the Sufi, but I also draw on some creative triggers and things from modern dance because they're very good. They kind of help you explore things and try things, and also from somatics because I was injured a lot. So I spent a lot of time with really great body workers and studied, materials that they offer. And I've combined these things into this form, whatever you want to call it, a shape or container, where the point of the time in the dance is to feel the body, is to feel it, and to feel it on the more and more subtle levels where I'm not really sure if there's a difference between the greatest subtlety of the sense feeling of the body and the spirit. I kind of think the spirit and the body are the same thing, and they move back and forth in different amounts of subtlety. And so the whole point for me in this exploration is to go in there and do that, hang out with it, be in it, not need anything back, not try to fix myself or anything. However, I do think that when I emerge, and I'm not the only one, I know that people that are working on this feel this way too, is that I hate myself less. I hate my body less. I'm kind of in the moment, I'm in the presence, and I'm in my body without hating it. So I do think that the way to come to loving the body, I know I'm wandering over here. You didn't really ask me this question, but I think it's kind of at the root.
I think it's important.
Is that the way to come to loving one's body is not to resist and all the hating kind of messages, or to say, I am beautiful, I am, I'm okay. Those are fine to do, but I think that's hard work. I think the easier thing is to go in and feel what's going on, because it's so fantastic. It's a dream of miraculous wonderment inside the movement, inside the being, inside the body, deep in there. And so when I spend more and more time in that feeling, that becomes a more dominant experience of my body. And that experience is wonderment and love and appreciation and pleasure, and like, what a great thing to be alive in a body. That's really, that's what happens. So it's a slow process, but it's sort of replacing something bad with something good, not as a scripting process, but as an experience.
And I agree with you 100%. And Stefan is saying very much appreciating the depth and honesty of all that's being shared. And I think that's true. I mean, it's really nice to hear you say that, because as you said, you were somebody that had, or probably are, I didn't mean to put that in the past tense, somebody that had the body and everything that we strive for, but even when you have it, we're still not content, because there is something fundamentally wrong inside in the way we see ourselves. And I agree with you that embodiment, because isn't it sad? Like, children don't have that. They're in their bodies, they're in their being, because they didn't realize that they shouldn't be. I mean, they should be, but they haven't been told externally that they shouldn't be. And wow, how did we lose that? And that's so sad. And it sounds like your method is very much aimed at getting you back to feeling that. And I like the way you put it, that you hated yourself less, because I think that that's true. As we make progress, there isn't this magic wand that suddenly, oh, now I feel great about myself and everything's fine. And no, it's a long process, I think, of getting back to that place that maybe we were at when we were children, but somehow lost it along the way.
Well, I think somehow is a very important thing. It's not somehow, it's very intentional. The culture wants to keep people, populations in certain structures. And it has served, the grand history of patriarchy very much for women to feel this way or to be this way. I mean, we appear quite free, but we're not that free when we're constantly having to, wear this or that or behave this way or that way, being I'm not young. Wow, this is a big one. You hear that it's going to come, but when it comes, you're like, the level of invisibility that starts to cloud over the, what's that word when people treat you like a child? And you're like, really, this is just something, it's built in to how the culture wants to operate, how it would like to dismiss people as they get older, particularly women. I mean, it's always a little worse for women than for men, though it will happen for men too. But, I'm just saying all of that is false stuff. And all of that is enculturated. And all of that is not my fault, your fault, anybody's fault. The only piece of control there is how much we've internalized it and how much we need to get the poison out, And it's not easy to take out this poison because it's built into everything, like what you're going to buy to put on. Like you don't think first thing off, oh, well, maybe now during COVID, when nobody can go out, everybody's thinking this way. It's like, man, comfortable. I'm going to be comfortable. But that's not usually. Usually you're thinking about, oh, how do I look? And then for women, the next thing is I'm going to wear some crazy crap piece of shoes that are like this, or something that makes me feel so uncomfortable because I can't sit and move the way I want to, etc. So, this sort of thing is all day long, every day, continuously, and we spend our good energy and our good money making ourselves uncomfortable because that's the expectation of the culture. Now, I don't think that culture is horrible 100%. I really don't think that. But I think that being able to be comfortable in your body, especially for women, is not top priority for the culture.
Yeah.
So.
No, not at all. I want to go back just a moment, and maybe you've already sort of explained what dance meditation is, but maybe you can just sort of give us an idea of if we went to a class or what the form is about, kind of what would that look like?
So I tend to identify myself as being involved in embodied mysticism. So for me, just to kind of get the ground there, embodiment means of the body. So for me, mysticism is very much, mysticism is the exploration of different levels of consciousness. I kind of feel that probably most of us would agree that that's kind of what it is. And for me, this happens in an embodied way. To me, the body is consciousness. I am not a glass of water person. No, the body is a glass and the spirit is the water. No. The body is 100% consciousness and spirit and whatever you want to call it. So the only way to actually awaken mystically is to move within into one's experience of the body in deeper and deeper subtlety. I do this in movement. I'm sure it can be done without much movement, but I think that movement is the language of the body. And this is what it does. It's not only the language of the body, it's the language of everything. It's the language of atoms, of the cosmos, of everything is moving. And so I feel that when we are exploring movement with the eyes closed, we're opening up to our own body's movement both as a moving entity and also to all the movements that are happening inside just for us to exist, our autonomic nervous system, the cellular motion, the, what we're constructed of, and the forces that are impinging on that. So gravity, trajectories of motion coming, we're in this continual web of physics, and all of that is, it's moving us. What would a class look like? So the class is very simple. Generally, I lead movement for a while and I close my eyes as I'm leading the movement, because what I'm trying to do is follow intuitively the flow of the movement. But I'm also a little cognizant that people are trying to follow me, so I generally repeat quite a bit. So it's not hard to follow. The movements are fairly easy. They're connected to a breathing. So the only thing a person might hear would be like inhale, exhale. Inhale. I might give a couple of and then I would stop giving them verbal cue and I would just continue with the movement. And people sometimes close their eyes, and then when I'm going to change, I'll say this time and I'll shift the movement. So the purpose of all of that is to move from a stimulated exterior place in one's state of mind and to destimulate, to actually calm down, to relax. It's quite hypnotic. It gradually evolves. It's sometimes the movements are stretching, or they may not be. They may just be, circular. It's not so much the particular movements as the way in which they're unfolding, which is gradual and repetitive and hypnotic and connected to the breathing, so that over time, 15, 20 minutes, everybody has switched gears from a more fragmented mental plane, just as you would do in a sitting meditation, but you're moving, into a quieter, more relaxed internal place. And I frequently will give little cue to feel what you're doing, so that you can feel your body more. Generally speaking, when we're less tense, we do feel our bodies more. So it's a natural thing that would happen, but I sometimes mention it because there are a lot of people that are very numb, and so they are not used to feeling their body. They're just not used to it. So I mention it occasionally. And then there'll usually be a period of time following that leading period where I'll give people a movement meditation to work on, like close your eyes and move feeling whatever, just your left arm. And they can move any way they want, but they keep their attention on what's happening with that arm. That's just one. There's millions of things one could focus on, but the idea is to focus on a simple thing and try and stay with it, but at the same time, letting that thing have its own life. Then there might be a period of rest where everybody lies down, and then another period. Then this class unfolds in different ways, where they can be, before Zoom, we would always have things where you maybe get with a partner and you do lead and follow, where there'd be a big circle and one person would lead in the middle and everybody else would follow, or there are different things that can happen. Stand up and do a lot of movement standing, dance like. People that came to my class as belly dancers would recognize this. Oftentimes I would use Arabic music, and I still do. I use music from all different cultures, whatever is going to support us. There is usually an intention in the course of a class to be in what I call different levels. The low level is lying down on the floor. The middle level is sitting-ish or kneeling-ish or something, and the high level is standing. But it's not always, you think, oh, when I lie down, I'm on the low level, I'm going to always be resting on the low level. But sometimes we spend a lot of time on the low level, that is lying down, moving, be lying on the floor and moving. And then we may be resting in the sitting place. You might sit in the rest, almost never standing and resting. It's more unlikely, but it's important to be what I call in three relationships to gravity, because they really use us differently, not only muscularly, but they connect to different parts of creaturely evolution on the planet. We sort of all started as snaky, fishy things, and then, came up to quadrupeds and then eventually became bipeds. So that can often open up as a perception. So it's a long period of time where people are hearing music, their eyes are closed for a lot of it, and they are able to let themselves relax more and more deeply inside their feeling body, and what's going to happen, because things always happen when you stop preventing them from happening. I have
surrender. Yeah.
That's right. Something will always happen. That's always a good line.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how a class would look, just a general idea.
We have a couple of questions here about music. In your dance practice, your meditative spiritual form, what role does music play, and what music do you dance to?
So music is the auditory room. It's a space. It's a reality. And music is very, very crucial. It's really crucial. So I always feel that it's not just a random thing, and it isn't all just how it sounds. So there are deep and long contemplative musical traditions that know this. I think of Indian classical music and Middle Eastern classical music, especially Persian music, where the music isn't there to entertain you. It's actually there to entrain the listener into deep mystical states. So initially, when I was first training in Sufism, that was very apparent. That's exactly what Adnan used. And I, in my own teaching, do use a lot of Persian music. I do use a lot of Indian classical music. However, I also know what is going on there. And I have, over time, been able to put together some types of Western music to do the same thing. So for the purpose of spending time evolutionarily within the body, there is the necessity of having a spacious kind of music, which doesn't mean necessarily always slow at all. It doesn't mean unrhythmic. What creates a spaciousness, I think, in very technical terms, is having enough repetition that you don't have to keep track of the music, having changes that don't shock you all the time, that evolve gradually. There is, of course, in Eastern music, a great sensitivity to what they call the harmonic overtones series. So the maqams, or the scales that are used, are structured using this harmonic overtone series. And I'm not going to get into this because you really should have a musician explain this, but we're all very sensitive to it. The music actually enters your body rather easily because it understands the harmonics. And this feeling is, it's easy on the ears, but it's also easy on the cells. So for me, I'm aware that this is the function of the music, that it actually has to feel right in the body and not just sound good. It can't just make me happy emotionally. It has to do more than that. So when I'm bringing music to a class, I've test driven it in my own practice a lot. And it isn't, sometimes it's about having variation and excitement, but most of the time it's more about having this music that is a very rich field, that is a kind of container. Really, if you have your eyes closed and you're moving, that is what you're doing. You're hearing. But you're not just hearing with your ears, you're actually hearing with your cells as well. But let me give some ideas. Yeah, Persian classical music I definitely use. I use a lot of new music that I'm not sure what you would call the genre, but Poppy Ackroyd and Ludovico Einaudi. I know how to say his name very well. Anyway, I'm trying to give some flavors as to what that would be, but different things. I use a lot of Middle Eastern music as well. Wow, some of which is definitely better than it sounds. You can go right out there in the ether. So there's an idea. It's a deep piece of it, for sure. A deep piece of it.
And we have another question. I love the allowing, internalizing, trusting, intention. Wonder if ever in this deep releasing approach, a person's emotional dam bursts and how that might be supported or framed.
So yes, it could definitely happen. And it does. And I think that one of the things, well, I think Zoom sort of takes care of itself because everybody is in their own room. But when you're in a room with other people, there is a level of safety that has to happen. And the safety is in a way that everybody has their own mat, their own soft thing that they are on, their own, and they're in their own space. And there is sort of an implied containment there. I think it's important that most everybody stay in their containment. But it doesn't have to be said. I've really almost never had, in the 35, 40 years I've been teaching this, I've really not had people, freak out and disturb the entire group. Not that we're trying to not disturb other people, but it just hasn't happened. I think in part because you're sinking in your own time. You're sinking inward. You're not being forced. You're not being told, now pursue this, go deep in this. You're not. There's just music, and you're going along. And when something is ready to come out, it comes out. And I think because it hasn't been forced out, it is something that you're sort of ready to do. You're sort of ready to do. That said, this is not a therapeutic modality. The awakenings that happen of the pain of the self, of the constructed self that we know, it's almost just like a natural sloughing off, like the snake sloughing off its skin. It's just going to happen, but it isn't really the goal for it to happen. So it's quite different than therapy. I think there's and I've done a lot of therapy, and I love therapy. It's not the goal. It's not celebrated, So I think that makes a difference, to say that the process is not really about getting rid of those things. The process is about awakening into the moment, awakening inside the self. And, the moments when I see these aspects of myself, they're just like they've been invited to the table finally. That's really what it is. But that's not the only thing on the table. The table is a full table. And I think there's a proportion. Now, I will say I'm not aware of people coming to me with tremendous trauma. However, I think everybody seems to have trauma with their body. And I think there is a fairly high preponderance of people who come to the seeking with me with trauma. But people that need more attention and more support won't necessarily stay with this that long. They will go to somebody who can really give them specific support, and I would definitely recommend that. I think this is for people that are already ready in their heart, if not in their experience, to have their experience. You sort of want to experience your experience. That's the goal. So I think that it might be people who have already done some work, maybe just not as much with their body yet, or just want to keep exploring more deeply, than wherever their other process had taken them. But anyway, it's a totally great question. I appreciate having the opportunity to say something about it. Yeah, I think it's a safe environment. I think that's a key. But now that I'm teaching on Zoom, it's very interesting because everybody is as comfortable as they could possibly be because they're in their own world. And that's taken a tremendous pressure off me as a teacher, that I know that they're safe and happy in their little world. And so I'm not having to carry that. I think I am concerned when I'm teaching that everybody feels safe and I keep an eye on everything. I kind of modulate the progression of the activity by observing what's happening.
Yeah, you can
feeling
feel what's going on. But I think the pace does have a lot to do with it. And I think the slowness of something, it's kind of like just wearing something away very gently. And unfortunately, I think there are people who don't appreciate that, in the sense that they want everything to happen quickly.
Yeah.
Like, let's go from this to this, but that isn't it. I think that the slowness creates kind of that support for yourself, that if you do it very slowly, then when something does start to break, there's some kind of support to that. Whereas when you're rushing through things, and I feel this, like when I teach in the US, that, or let's say more of a Western culture, that everybody's in a hurry. Like, they want to go through level 1 to level 2 to whatever. But that I think is dangerous. I think this slowness is what really, or having a daily practice where you're doing something daily, then you have these breakthroughs. But somehow when you have them, you've created some kind of a support, or maybe the web that's holding you is stronger. It hasn't just been, weakened somehow by getting to something too quickly. And that is something beautiful about doing these slower, more meditative kind of practices, because I think you're within that creating the support for it while you're loosening everything up at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with you. That slow is important. It's sort of like if you want to make friends with a wild animal, you just can't go grab it. You have to. It's very slow. It's exactly like that. Exactly like that.
Yes, we need to make that acceptable. To do things slowly needs to become acceptable, rather than rushing through or getting to the end too quickly, because it doesn't benefit you at all, I don't think.
No.
So let's talk a little bit about your book.
Thank you.
Your books, but let's start with the book that you've already, Skin of Glass, the one that you've already published. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, Skin of Glass is a memoir about dance as a spiritual path. That's sort of the quick tagline. And I came to writing it because I actually had a BFA from Julliard, and then I wanted to get a master's because at a certain point in my career I just felt I needed a higher degree. I went to Columbia Teachers College, and I just was like, no, this is definitely not what I need to be doing. It was all about writing good syllabuses, and I'd already been teaching in university for a long time. I was like, oh, no. So I went to do a self-design degree, I guess, through Lesley University, and it's a wonderful thing. You meet twice a semester or something, once a semester with, like 3 incredible PhD, that's what I did, people. And my team was an amazing thing. And the first semester was just trying to figure out what it was I was going to be doing my master's on. And very soon it became apparent to me that though I wanted to look into various topics, I didn't want to become a specialist in any of them. And I finally, by the end of the first year, by gathering all my notes and by doing a lot of reading, I read a lot of memoir, a lot, and writing a research paper on memoir, I realized that, of course, that I wanted to do a writing degree and write memoir, and that there wasn't a memoir of this type. I couldn't find one. There are many dance memoirs. There are many spiritual memoirs, but the dance memoirs were more about, or dancers, they were more about sort of just the outside of their existence of I went here and did this, that kind of thing. And I realized what I wanted to write was what it felt like to be inside your body as a path. And so that required me finding a kind of language that isn't all that apparent, and I ended up using poets and people that have written books about traveling, and my main language model was Gretel Ehrlich, who wrote a piece called This Cold Heaven about traveling in the Arctic. And I said, well, I want to write my memoir as a journey inside my body, as if my body is a landscape, and I'm experiencing it. So the first part of the memoir is pretty much a lot of what we've been talking about is just, young dancer, and then, Sufi student. So it's very straightforward, very easy to follow. Everybody loves the first part. The second part is what I call the thriller. It's really me exploring sequentially different body parts, legs and crotch, spine, skin, ovaries. And how I came to that was that I would do my practice for every day for 3 or 4 months, focusing on a body part. So I might do any number of things, but I would always spend 10 or 15 minutes each day focusing on legs and crotch, for instance. And I did that for 3 months, and I would journal. And anyway, the process of that turned out to be this tremendous narrative arc of all these discoveries that I made about many things, many things, and in my deeper history. And you have to read the book to find out what those are. And it kind of wove in the fact that, the whole memoir starts the day before 9/11, really in a way. And I split with my husband the day before 9/11, then 9/11, and then I was getting divorced, and then I was dating somebody, and I was, also in perimenopause, and I'm doing my practice, I'm uncovering my past, and I'm weaving in what it is to be in my body at this time, and what having an embodied practice, how that becomes the containment for exploring these subjects, what it feels like, to be, in my body in perimenopause, for instance, or, these things. So that's the middle part of the book, and it's unusual, and it was hard to find language for it, but I really felt happy with it. When I had finished it, I felt like we need this. We need to be writing and reading this kind of thing, And then the end part is just a little denouement of, just little anecdotes of being a teacher, being a performer, that kind of draw on perceptions that I had unfolded in the book. So that's what the memoir is. It's a slightly unusual memoir, but in a way, it's in its own way kind of a primer to the practice as well, because it's sort of what can happen, at least it happened to me, from doing this kind of process. It's just that I happen to bring out my narrative arc, but anybody could do the same thing, So that's what Skin of Glass is. Mm-hmm.
Sounds wonderful. Yes.
Wow.
I'm looking forward to reading that. Yeah.
I'm going to get it up on Kindle. That's my
Please
next
do.
step on that.
That's the only way I can read anything now these days. So yeah.
Better for me too, really.
And then you have a new book.
Yeah, so
you didn't stop there. You have a new one.
Right. So it's sort of weird, because I think in a way, when I went to do the master's, I really wanted to write the book that I've just finished now, but I had to write the memoir first. It sort of was maybe easier to write. It's sort of easy to write your own story in a way. It's sort of like you're interested in your own story usually. And and I'd never written a book, so it's really hard to write a book, can I just say? And congratulations to you, Leslie, because you've written more than one. It's very hard to write a book, and I had to learn how to write a book, so that was that. Now the next one was the one that's been sitting on my plate for many, many, many years. It is about the practice. It has sort of 3 sections. The first section is about making a nest for yourself to do a practice, which is music, which is place, which is what you wear, which is the way to go in attitudinally, or some elements. I just discussed these, like the ground, what you make for yourself. I was very influenced by a wonderful book by a philosopher named Gaston Bachelard called The Poetics of Space. And he talks a lot about all the significances of houses, nests, of things that animals make to contain themselves and humans make. And, it's just such a magical book. And I realized that I needed to write about this. Like, where do we situate our practice? Is it, and the idea of where we situate ourselves as being a place of intimacy and safety, and what are those things to consider? The next part of the book is about the process that we always go through, which there are 4 R's that I've used for many years: relaxation, receptivity, reciprocity, rest. Relaxation was kind of what I discussed before. The first part of anything and in the movement, whether it's a practice or a class or anything, is to relax, and then to move into a receptive place where you can take in your experience rather than being blocked off from it, And to me, this is always the pivot point. You want to reach this place where you can take in what's happening to you, what's in you, what's going on. Reciprocity is a non-ordinary state. It's when you sort of move beyond this constant sense of self-modulating self into the moment. It has a timelessness. It's a different, non-ordinary state. There's a feeling that, the reason I call it reciprocity is that you expand and receive energy continuously. So there's a feeling that you could go on forever. And rest is rest. Now, rest is so crucial. And I talk about it in the book about how really we just really don't regard rest enough as a super valuable thing. But I was just all done with writing these 4 R's. And then I read the greatest thing. I was so lucky. I'm so glad I haven't published a book yet. It was this little piece of science data that came through this about Hydra. Hydra is a small little animal. We know kind of what it is. I think it has tentacles or something, but it has no brain. But it moves and then it rests. And so the researchers said, you know what? Sleep exists. It exists before there was a brain. So sleep or rest is more fundamental than the brain. And so thank God I found that piece of detail to put in the book, because that's it right there. It's fundamental, this oscillation between doing and not doing, so that, who knows why, but it's fundamental. So those are the 4 R's.
That could be another topic that we could spend hours talking about, but we won't right now.
And then the third part of the book, which is the biggest part, is really a lot of movement meditations, different ones, and different kinds of explorations, breathing, different kinds of breathing and movement, different kinds of imagery, or way to seek out imagery, and some. I give a lot of them, and then suggest ways for people to find their own versions. I mean, this is just like I've done millions, it seems like, but probably thousands and hundreds of thousands of, movement meditation cues in the course of my teaching. So these are just some, and there's some that I keep coming back to, and I give the reasons why. So that's the shape of the book. And it's a sort of a long life work to write about a practice, because you actually have to have a practice as well as being able to write, as well as being able to write a book. So for me, that's what it took, all 3 of those things. So.
And is it specifically about dance meditation, or is it kind of beyond that? So this is an experience of dance meditation in a book, sort of.
Yeah, I mean, I even took dance meditation. I do mention the word a lot in it, but I took it out of the title components. I don't have a top level title. All I have is what they call this, I have the subtitle, which is Movement Meditations for Entering the Innermost Self. And I'm still looking for the top level title, but that is an explanation. So I felt, and my editor felt too, that it would, it's bigger than dance. It's the thing that holds dance is, there always. But I'm just saying that it's movement, and it is a larger topic than simply being about dance. It's for any moving body would be able to relate to this, which hopefully will be many humans, because I would love it if people knew that they were a moving body. I think that would be a good thing for the whole existence of the planet,
Yeah. And I think it's the right moment, because I think people are starting to really realize that there's a lot more types of dance and that are, more spiritually or sacred dance or whatever you want to call them, but more forms of dance that are geared in that direction to go inward and to, help us evolve and find ourselves. Yeah. Well, it sounds wonderful. We're waiting.
Thank you. I'm pretty close. Yeah, I can finally say I'm pretty close. I mean, and I'm really grateful to my editor, which is, she's really been cracking the whip over me this year. And maybe COVID came in a timely way that, we just had to stay home and get on with things that,
Exactly.
have some energy for
created
that.
that space for us to get things done, hopefully. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Well, tell us about do you have any up and coming events and how people could contact you? I will put up the link to your website, but just
I'm pretty
any
findable.
events you have.
Yeah, I'm teaching in March on Zoom, so you're certainly welcome to come and partake of that. I teach this is East Coast America time, Friday evening and Saturday morning, and I know that's variously available to various time zones. But so for people who can do both time zones and both sessions, it kind of makes a nice bridge, because you do something, then you go to sleep, then you get up and you do a little more. So that's nice. So that's Dance Meditation, and I'm pretty much Dance Meditation on Facebook, on Instagram, and the website is dancemeditation.org. So it's pretty easy to find me. You can contact me through private message or email. There's an email you can get on my email list from the site. It's pretty much right up there and down in the footer. So if you'd like to be on an email list, you're welcome to do that, or just come and try something for a little bit. I also have a couple of courses, sort of online courses that you could, purchase and do at your own leisure whenever, I felt very strongly about Zoom that it's so fantastic to meet in real time, and there's a tremendous feeling of connection. So I have not been recording it, and I don't record it, and I do keep it in real time for now. But there are some recorded online courses you can do, as well as DVDs if you prefer those. So, yeah. I don't know where Leslie went. I should be saying more right now. There you are.
Here I am. I came back. Well, thank you.
Oh,
thank
my
you,
pleasure.
Dunya. That's been wonderful to talk to you. And here's Dunya's website, dancemeditation.org, for anyone who would like to get on her mailing list or get more information or see what's going on. So thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me here. It's really been lovely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you to the listeners. I want to just mention that next month we have Stefan Freeman, and he's the author of Dance Wise, and that will be March 21st at 6 p.m. Universal Time. And for those of you who want more information, you can go to my website, universaldancer.com. And there's also a download of an ebook if you would like to download that. There's a tab for the podcasts. You can see all the up and coming guests that will be joining us. And any information, I always post it there on my website. So thank you for joining, and I hope you will join us next month. Bye-bye.